The restaurant was the kind of place where a single meal cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their light scattering across white tablecloths and polished silver. Alexander Blackwood sat at his usual table, a glass of wine untouched before him, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who had built an empire from nothing. He had everything he had ever wanted. He was miserable. 5 years ago, he had been a different man, a struggling entrepreneur with dreams too big for his small apartment. His wife, Elena, had believed in him when no one else did. She had worked 2 jobs to support them while he built his company. But when they couldn't have children, something broke between them. He had told her she was the problem. He had walked out the door and never looked back. He had built his fortune on the wreckage of his marriage. His assistant was saying something about quarterly projections, but Alexander had stopped listening. His eyes had caught a figure moving between the tables, a woman in a waitress uniform, her hair pulled back, her posture careful. She was carrying a tray loaded with dishes, moving with a grace that seemed out of place in the sterile room. He knew that walk. He knew that posture. He knew that woman. His wine glass slipped from his fingers, red spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Elena. She was thinner than he remembered, her face marked by exhaustion, but it was her. And as she turned to serve a table across the room, he saw it. The swell of her belly beneath the apron. She was pregnant. The woman he had left because she couldn't give him a child was carrying one. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor, drawing stares from the other diners. He did not care. He crossed the room without thinking, his hand reaching for her arm. She turned, her eyes widening with shock, then fear, and something else he could not name. The tray slipped from her hands, dishes shattering on the floor. The restaurant fell silent. Every eye was on them. "Alexander," she breathed, her voice barely audible over the ringing in his ears. "What are you doing here?" He could not answer. He could only stare at the child she carried. The manager appeared, flustered, apologizing to Alexander for the disruption. He did not know that the millionaire and the waitress had once shared a life, a bed, a future. Elena knelt to clean up the broken dishes, her hands shaking, her face hidden. Alexander knelt beside her, ignoring the manager's protests. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "look at me." She would not. She gathered the broken pieces into her apron and stood, walking away without a word. He followed her through the kitchen doors, past the startled cooks, into a narrow hallway lined with lockers. She had her back to him, her hands pressed against the locker door, her shoulders shaking. "Elena." She turned, and he saw the tears she had been hiding. "What do you want, Alexander?" Her voice was sharp, but it cracked at the edges. "You left me. You told me I was broken. What could you possibly want from me now?" He did not know what he wanted. He had not thought past the moment of seeing her. He looked at her belly, at the child she carried, and the question burst from him before he could stop it. "Is it mine?" Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "Is it yours?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You walked out 5 years ago. You divorced me. You told me I was worthless because I couldn't give you a child. And now you want to know if it's yours." She pushed past him, heading for the back exit. He followed, his hand catching the door before it closed. The alley behind the restaurant was dark, the city sounds muffled by the surrounding buildings. She stood with her back to him, her arms wrapped around herself, protecting the child she carried from the cold and from him. "I never remarried," she said quietly. "I couldn't. After you, I couldn't trust anyone with my heart." His own heart clenched. He had remarried. Twice. Both marriages had ended in divorce, both wives taking their settlements and moving on. He had told himself it was their fault, that they did not understand the demands of his life. But standing in this alley, watching the woman he had abandoned cradle a child that might be his, he understood for the first time that the fault had always been his. "Elena!" he began, but she cut him off. "The baby is not yours," she said, her voice flat. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stepped back, his hand falling to his side. She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes that looked like pity. "His name is David. He's a carpenter. He builds things with his hands. He doesn't have much money, but he has a heart larger than any fortune." She touched her belly. "He gave me this. He gave me back my hope." Alexander stood in the alley, the city sounds fading to a dull roar. A carpenter. She had left him for a carpenter. The man who owned half the city, who could buy anything, anyone, had been replaced by a man who worked with his hands. He should have been angry. He should have been insulted. Instead, he felt something he had not felt in years: shame. "I'm sorry," he said, the words foreign on his tongue. "For everything?" She stared at him, and for a moment, the anger in her face softened. "You should go," she said quietly. "David will be picking me up soon. He doesn't know about you. About us. I don't want him to." Alexander nodded, but he did not move. "Does he treat you well?" She smiled then, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. "He treats me like I'm the only woman in the world." The words were a knife, but he deserved it. He left her there, walking back through the restaurant, past the curious diners, past the manager who stammered apologies. He did not hear them. He did not see them. He walked out into the night and stood on the sidewalk, the cold air biting at his face. A truck pulled up to the alley entrance, old, rusted, held together with hope. A man climbed out, his hands calloused, his face kind. David, the carpenter. Alexander watched from across the street as David disappeared into the alley and emerged moments later with Elena tucked under his arm. He was laughing at something she had said, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. She was laughing too, her face turned up toward his, her whole body relaxed in a way Alexander had never seen. They climbed into the truck together, and as it pulled away, Elena looked out the window and saw him. Their eyes met for a single heartbeat. Her expression did not change. She did not wave. She simply looked at him, and in that look, he saw everything he had thrown away. The truck turned the corner and was gone. Alexander stood alone on the sidewalk, the richest man in the city, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly poor. He had money. He had power. He had nothing that mattered. He did not go home that night. He walked the streets until dawn, past the buildings his company owned, past the stores where people bought things they did not need with money they did not have. He thought about Elena, about the years she had worked beside him, believed in him, loved him. He thought about the words he had said to her when he left. "You're broken. You can't give me what I need." He had been wrong. He was the one who was broken. He found her again, not to win her back, not to claim the child. He found her at the small house she shared with David, a modest place with a garden in the back and a porch that sagged slightly. He stood at the gate until David came out, his face wary. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Alexander said. He held out an envelope. "For the baby. For her. For the years I owe her." David did not take it. "She doesn't want your money." "I know," Alexander said. "But it's not about what she wants. It's about what I owe." He set the envelope on the gatepost and turned to leave. Elena came to the door, her hand on her belly, her face unreadable. "What is this?" she asked. He did not turn around. "It's the company," he said. "The one we built together. I put it in your name. It was always yours as much as mine. I just forgot that for a while." He walked away. He did not look back. Behind him, Elena opened the envelope, her hands shaking. Inside was a deed, a letter, and a small photograph. The two of them, young and happy, standing outside the apartment where they had started everything. She pressed the photograph to her chest, tears streaming down her face. David put his arm around her, and they stood together in the doorway, watching the man who had once been her husband disappear down the road. He was a millionaire with nothing. They were a carpenter and a waitress with everything that mattered. And somewhere, in the house with the sagging porch, a child was waiting to be born into a world where love, not money, would be its inheritance.